CEO compensation. Lately, there has been heated discussion about whether CEOs are paid too much. And as you can see on my right, there is quite a drastic difference between CEO-worker pay ratio in different industries. For example, the ratio is 458 to 1 in consumer discretionary firms and only 162.5 to 1 in materials. There are many reasons why this is so. And in order to explore this topic, we will be discussing why CEO pay can vary so greatly, what makes up CEO pay, and finally we will be inviting two specialists, Bessie Liu and Niels Hölscher, to discuss whether CEOs can ever be paid too much. We can split the causes of this into three broad categories: the CEO themselves, the firm and the market, and finally the business model. The CEO themselves has an effect on how much they get paid. The bargaining power of the CEO, their experience, their ability to negotiate better, being a generalist rather than a specialist, and whether they hold both the CEO and the chairman position all play a role in increasing the amount they get paid. Furthermore, the company also plays a role in CEO remuneration. The firm size, the operating and market performance, the riskiness and the capital intensity of the firm have an impact on CEO pay. And finally, the market and the business model of the firm influence CEO's pay. Companies with large numbers of part-time or seasonal workers have higher CEO pay ratios. As well as this, the homogeneity of the market and the employee unionization all play a role in how much a CEO gets paid. Finally, CEO compensation also depends on the country in which the company and the CEO operates in. This graph here shows the countries with the largest CEO to worker pay ratio around the world. As you can see, CEO worker pay ratio in the United States is more than double that of the next country, Switzerland. Why is this so? Well, first of all, in the USA, equity pay, such as stock option compensation, makes up the largest part of the income. This means that CEO pay in the USA varies more with the success of the firm than, for example, European counterparts. As well as this, firms are very different in the USA and Germany, for example. Once you account for the size of the company, the industry, whether the company is family owned, and the fact that US CEOs often are paid more in equity, CEOs in the US are actually paid around the same amount as CEOs in Germany. Now that we know how much CEO compensation varies, what does CEO compensation actually consist of? Here we can see an example of what a CEO's pay could look like. CEO compensation can entail 4 different types of compensation: salary and bonus, long-term incentive plans and restricted stock, options, and employee stock options. These are used to align the CEO's goals with shareholder interests, as well as incentivize the CEO to act in the company's short-term and long-term interests. Now, the question we've all been asking ourselves: can there be too much CEO compensation? In order to explore this topic further, I have invited 2 experts on the topic to discuss the issue today. Niels Hölscher is a journalist for Business Era magazine and has been making headlines in recent weeks for his outspoken campaigns against the drastic CEO-worker pay difference. Bessie Liu, on the other hand, is a journalist for Economy Today magazine and has a rather different perspective on the issue. After all, CEOs do have a lot more responsibility. So, what is your take on this issue?
In today's world, employees are usually the most valuable assets of a company. Now imagine there's a company without employees but a CEO. So you would agree with me that the company would run on a significantly lower performance level than the usual company would do, right?
If we now assume that the same company just has its employee structure and no CEO, you can already tell that the performance level is much higher. Regardless of the responsibilities, salary is linked to a lot of factors, and the turnover per employee may is the largest determinant. Given the example, employees are mainly responsible for the turnover. If the turnover of the employees and the responsibilities of the CEO are weighted, one could come to the conclusion that the salary gap should be way smaller. Just to give a brief overview of how big the salary pay gap is. Last year, the 350 largest firms paid their CEOs an average 300 times more than their employees, an increase of 17.6% to the previous year. This was caused by the shift of the stock market compensation, an opportunity which is not pursuable for usual employees, which actually produce a necessary turnover, as 43% of all Americans do not own any equity. Furthermore, this equity-based model led to ridiculous salaries. For example, the CEO of Metal outcompensated his employees by a factor of about 4,900. Walmart CEO topped his employees by a factor of 1,150.
I agree with what you said, but CEO compensation is a rather complicated topic. There's certainly the pay disparities between the workers and the CEOs. However, what we really have to think about is the roles and the responsibilities between the worker and the CEO. And it is no doubt that the CEOs are the key strategic decision makers of the company. Nowadays, a firm must strive to be successful on a global platform, and the strategic decision making is so important for firms' profitability and as well as a firm's fate. A strategic decision can contribute to millions of revenue and profitability gained for the firm, because strategy is a key differentiator that can disrupt markets, focus on investments, and fuel success. A top talent like CEO leads the company in the right direction and attract more of the best talents to the company. And also CEO's reputation affects company's valuation and stock prices. There are empirical evidence on the importance of key influencers in the company. A recent analysis of 32 technology firms shows that the personality of a CEO shaped the culture of the organization. And another study of a 20-year review from 1993 to 2012 showed a CEO's judgment affects key strategic and managerial processes, such as staffing, financial, and marketing decisions. What we can really have to think about is a different skill sets, workers who are in a different positions than the CEO. They certainly don't have the skill set nor experience required of a CEO, and nor have they need to make strategic decisions and lead a firm to succeed on a global platform. And there is certainly a huge difference in the level of responsibilities, and it is reasonable to see companies paying top money for the top talent.
However, studies could evidently show that a large pay gap is harmful for CEOs standing in the company. Exception holds for CEOs who are also founders of the company, as they are usually backed by their employees.
Many studies do support the Trinnemann theory. It states that the different pay steps in the upwards trending hierarchy of a company motivates the employee to reach the next step, and therefore enhance overall performance. Other researchers are backing the equity theory, saying that the pay disparity leads to a feeling of unfair treatment, therefore leading employees with a too low perceived salary lower their effort level or switch companies. Either way harms the company's performance.
You're completely right about the equity theory, but what we also have to think about is the composition of a CEO's pay package, which includes a base salary component and a incentive component, which is the equity theory that you mentioned. In the incentive component includes a salary bonus and the stock options. The rise of US CEO compensation from pay ratio of 20:1 originally skyrocketed to about 300:1 or higher 50 years ago. It was partially the coincident increase in market capitalization of the largest firms in the 1980s, which led to the incentive-based CEO compensation also increases. However, the CEO compensation trend has always been turbulent due to the stock fluctuation, yet it has always been above what was 50 years ago. Some companies believe that by awarding an amount of stock to CEO as an incentive to run the company well, when the stock increases, then the benefits the shareholders and the CEO themselves. Additionally, the pay of a public company CEO is normally set by a compensation committee formed of members of its board of directors. The board of directors tend to be on good terms with CEOs, and therefore it is not uncommon that they tend to go along with the higher CEO compensation trend. A study did a research on how board structures may impact CEO compensation, particularly whether a company CEO role correlates to a higher payout. The analysis focused on the S&P 500 companies whose board structure remained relatively constant over the recent 3-year period to provide a consistent view of the trend. The results found the company revenue and board leadership structures showed significant correlation with the CEO pay level. While there was no significance with CEO tenure or the company's relative shareholder return, the highest compensation was found when the board chair is a current employee or officer, someone who beneficially owns more than 50% of the company's voting power. And the lowest when the chairman has no material connection to the company other than board service. Although top talent definitely worth the companies to pay top money, we must consider the composition of CEO pay, which also are the driving forces in the maybe high CEO compensation today, particularly the incentive stocks and board of directors who are involved in setting the CEO compensation, and cannot just simply consider the worth of a top talent separately when making a judgment on whether or not these CEOs are overcompensated.
Absolutely. There are current restrictions on CEO salaries attempted to reduce CEO worker pay disparity. For example, the city of Portland, Oregon in the USA imposed a 10% business tax on companies whose executive salaries top the worker salary by a factor of 100 or more. If the ratio exceeds 250 to 1, the business tax increases to 20%. This is considered as the first taxation approach to actively tackle the pay gap. Following this, the officials of Rhode Island, Minnesota, Connecticut and San Francisco are preparing similar approaches. The slightly different approach is chosen by Rhode Island. The pending Senate bill would prefer companies with an executive pay to median worker pay ratio of 125 when it comes to state contracting.
Thank you. You've both discussed different perceptions on this issue. This is certainly a complicated and interconnected topic. Evidently, there is no easy solution to this issue. So what should we do? Well, perhaps one solution could be developing best practices and regulations for compensation design and reporting. And luckily for us, there has been some development in the field of CEO compensation. The Dodd-Frank Act, for example, has been implemented in the country with the largest CEO worker pay gap, the USA. This act mandates the disclosure of executive pay as well as the ratio of CEO pay to the pay of all other employees at the firm. Furthermore, shareholders can provide their opinion of CEO compensation through a non-binding vote. The compensation committee must be independent, and clawbacks of executive compensation are allowed if the CEO's actions are deemed inappropriate. We believe that CEO compensation packages should be designed to encourage a long-term view of shareholder value. Hence, we should move away from employee stock options to more restricted stock. Furthermore, by moving away from options, CEO compensation, especially in the USA, will vary less. Board members should be educated on the CEO compensation in order to critically discuss whether it is justified. Finally, by lengthening the CEO's holding requirements on equity, we can encourage a focus on long-term success of the firm. Thank you for joining us today on this special report on CEO compensation. We hope that we've educated you on this very important issue.